Okay, welcome to this week's episode of the NJC's 10-minute takeaway, where we will try and cram in as much information as we can into a 10-minute workshop. I'm Tom Stenson, audit trainer and head of training for the NJC. And today I'm joined by Chris Bensted, a driving instructor, audit trainer and theory specialist. Thanks for joining us, Chris.
Thank you for having me.
In today's topic, we are going to be discussing the importance of theory training, how to include it in lessons and PDI sessions. And so our 10 minutes starts now. So why is theory so important, Chris?
It's the foundation of everything else. You can't answer a question without knowing the facts. So the more facts we know and the more we know about our subject, the better our answer is going to be, and therefore the more successful we're going to be. So if you haven't joined those dots together, I think we live in a bit of a bubble in which it's all about practical and theory is this separate thing, and it's not. It's if you look at the Maslow's triangle pyramid, whatever you want to call it, you can't get the top bit without the bottom bit.
No.
So you can't be successful at practical without a level of theory, but we tend to end up on stilts rather than on a solid platform. And for me, the theory is about embracing a bit more, of a solid platform underneath us, so that we know not the what but the why.
And I think for me personally, I used to have that sort of mindset where it was the important foundation. And although I still agree with that, I think where it was limited for me is I used to think it was a foundation, but then I moved past it. And I think, as you've said there, it's so important to include that we're always referring to it.
It's not helped by the fact that the theory test, what comes at the end, that goal is not the theory, it's the theory test.
Yeah.
There's a really important differentiation. And the theory test is rubbish. The part one's rubbish and the theory test is rubbish. Because the only reason for having the L test theory, or any of the category theories, is for more road safety, to benefit and to make people safer, to benefit the driver. Knowing how to top up a battery, which you won't do now if you start learning to drive. It doesn't happen, if you do, it's really specialist and you're going to know anyway. Or learn, but that's irrelevant. It shouldn't be in there. And it's watered down by challenges that are not theory. My job as a specialist theory trainer is probably 60% nothing to do with driving theory. It's to do with comprehension and translation and understanding, but it's not driving. And I think that's where a lot of people end up drawing this big divide, and they find it doesn't quite match. So the theory is important because it is what you're teaching. It's the book version, not the hands-on practical version. And if you're then including lots of stuff that doesn't matter, then people are going to feel that it's not worth it. And you, as you said, you're going to move past it and leave it behind. But actually, when it comes down to the brass tacks, some of that stuff is vitally important.
Yeah, and I understand why it's there, but I agree. I think there are better ways that it could be done. Whether we can get that change will be a completely different thing. We've only got 5 minutes left. So, so what would be your advice then to instructors that are listening to this? What would be your advice to try and include more theory in driving lessons? How can we promote that more with our learners?
Don't change what you're doing, because you're already covering it. Just be a little bit more pedantic when it comes to language. Make sure that you are addressing technical terms. It's okay to call the pedals the thingy, the what's it, and the whatever else, but they need to know the technical word, because that's the word that's going to be in the theory. It's one of the biggest challenges, that comprehension, is the words don't match. So make sure you're being accurate. Make sure you know your stuff. Sit the theory. Go through the questions. If I haven't done it for a while, go through, do a few. You can do that with your pupils.
Mm.
Just make sure you know your stuff. And and you can also go and revisit the part one because there's other stuff in there. And just try and look for opportunities to just clarify your learning, which is what we do, but just kind of think about the theory at the same time. And don't ask what, ask why. Because that's what people are failing for on the theory. They're learning the what via rote learning through revision apps, but they don't know why. Challenge it. It's not good enough to know what a dual carriageway looks like. Why is it a dual carriageway? The number of people that get that wrong is scary. That they don't know what a dual carriageway actually is defined as. So those are the things that I would say is start whenever there's a what, make sure the why is covered. But is that not what we do for practical lessons anyway? We include it. It's that actually those, just because they can do it doesn't mean they understand it. The practical kind of ticks the box. Question them a little bit more. So,
and I think you raised some really good points there. I know for me that it's okay being able to recite an answer, but actually having the understanding is probably the most important thing. And I remember helping a pupil a couple of years ago with some theory because they were struggling. And I got a question wrong. And I was like, oh my gosh, I got a question wrong. I can't be very good. But actually, I just misread the question. So my understanding was different. And it was something so simple. But it was a good experience for the learner to see actually, we need to have this understanding. But it's also made me research more theory as well, which I think is a good thing. Like you say, keeping our knowledge is important.
I think you touched on something really important there, which is you waited until they were struggling before you helped them. And, I think just sometimes paving the way a little bit at the beginning. Not everyone needs their hand held, but just taking 10 minutes to explain what the theory is and the best way to approach it. Don't do mock tests on the apps. Do the questions, leave the mock tests for the end because they mess things up. If you want to know more, I'll let you know, but we've got limited time.
Yeah. And although it's very relevant, this young lad had failed, I think, 18 theory tests. And his driving instructor at the time had said, no, I'm not going to give you any more lessons until you pass your theory test.
Yeah.
And I was the only one in the area that offered any additional help. And it was, I felt really sorry for him because it was such a shame.
Yeah. Those numbers aren't unusual in my world, unfortunately.
No, I can imagine. Yeah. So we've covered for what instructors can do. What about for trainers? Because we've got some trainers that listen to this. Would you say that's still relevant, or are there any other tips you could give trainers to try and help them, especially for their trainees?
The reason as an industry we're bad at theory is because we're indoctrinated into it in a way of being bad at theory that go away, do your part one, and then come back. The part one is done via learn by rote, just using the questions. Not all of the test questions are in the revision. So you've got to go through the books. You've got to do that. And as an industry, we're not necessarily booky people. A lot of people have got here because they didn't fit in well to the book style academia. So something that I took me 18 months of consulting with TSO and the DVSA to be told if you buy the Kindle version, doesn't need to be on a Kindle, but the e-version of the book, the Kindle app will read it out to you. Why they couldn't have told me that in the first place. It took me 18 months to get there. But so there are options. Look at those options and engage with PDIs on that, at the beginning, before they just go and learn it to pass the test and treat it as part of the part three. Connect it. What would you do with your learners? How would you explain these things? Because then they're going to be stronger when it comes to the traditional driving instructor teaching. So embrace it and blend your learning together. I'm fed up with part one, part two, part three based learning. It doesn't work.
And I think if we can get people to consider, instead of those one-stop shop 1, 2, and 3, that actually we're all on the learning path, and that learning path hopefully will never end. So you're not expected to necessarily know every answer to every theory. knowledge, but to build our knowledge as trainers will only help our trainees, which then hopefully will demonstrate to them how to do it to learners.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't want to, and not everyone likes the theory, it's there. Get in touch. I'm happy to help and support what people are doing. So it's not for everyone. And I get that. But if you can introduce little bits that you are happy to engage with, and then find support structures, there's not an awful lot of support structures specifically for part one. I do both, but we so often rely on that approach. It's nice to have other resources that are out there that people can dip into, and find different ways of learning, because we all have different learning styles.
Fantastic. Well, that is the end of our 10 minutes. Can I just say thank you very much for joining us today, Chris?
Thank you. Much appreciated.